So it's interesting. I actually have to admit that when we sat down, I forgot about that major tie. That one of the big reasons I started to do the work I did was because my grandfather was a councilman in Pittsburgh. In the I think it was a couple of administrations before. Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 or something like that. So had that intersection. And then you talked about when we sat down. You talked about, and it's interesting. I think you all know that Zipcar had a successful IPO just a couple of weeks ago. That I think you said, and if you can correct me if I'm quoting you incorrectly, that when I asked you to talk a little about social innovation and social impact, what you said was, I can't imagine there is a better for-profit company to work for today and lead that could have the tremendous impact both financially, which you plan on making sure happens, but also from a social perspective as well. And I wonder whether you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the things that if I had sort of crafted the ideal company when I was in business school, it would have been a company that creates really great shareholder value, but also does something really good, just by virtue of growing and becoming a large business. And that's Zipcar. I mean, we're green. We're saving people money. That often just translates right back into the local economy. Every car we put on takes about 15 personal cars away because people sell cars or choose not to buy cars when they use our service. And we've partnered with governments to do that. And I really can't imagine, especially starting from $2 million and now becoming a $200 million company, a better experience than that. And who knew there were some early supporters like Gene, who's sitting here, who's doing a little fist pump about the IPO, I think, right now. But there were some early people, and I think we all sort of had the same sense that if you can figure out a business model that works here, there is a really, really big idea. And the big idea was helping people live smarter, lower cost lifestyles in cities, but also improving the way cities operate and improving. I just couldn't imagine a business model that just by virtue of getting bigger was going to do that. And so it's been parts of the passion. I mean, sometimes people think in startups, when they go well, I joke now, it took us 8 years or 10 years to be an overnight success a few weeks ago on the IPO. And there's a lot of hard work that goes on, and what keeps you going is that idea that you're connected to something that's bigger than all of us, that's really going to change cities in a profound way for the long term, and it's just been a great run and really fascinating.
And that's what's been interesting in a way. When I first heard about Zipcar, I thought, my God, this is great urban policy. I mean, it's just the perfect way to solve a huge problem that's been really choking cities, not to mention really making them less and less economically viable. So it's a great, that's where innovation from the private sector now makes such an incredible difference. It's a concept that could not have been made to work from within government. But
I mean, that's an interesting notion, and I think it was it Groucho Marx who said that how do you become an overnight success? You take 20 years to get there. I think is the line. But what I'd love to, and we're going to take a few questions so you can think about that. But here's where I want to bridge this conversation just to hear both of your perspectives. So I know there's some people in the room here who would like to see that we would sort of drive as many for-profit models that might be able to allow us to deal with different social issues. I think that from my perspective, there are some social issues it's going to be pretty hard to figure out how you can make money off it. But when you think about innovation and you think about dealing with social issues, what sounds like someone's cell phone, pretty good one, good ring. When you think about innovation and you think about social issues and finding a business model, what do you see are some of the biggest barriers to actually being able to make progress? And if you want to speak to whether you think we need to, figure out as many for-profit models to do it, or what the role of a nonprofit would be and what the barriers are do they have to actually make progress, or where government plays in. I mean, keep it that open-ended, and maybe I'll follow up with some sort of question. I don't know which one of you wants to start.
first?
I can go, sure. You want to go?
Yeah, you go first. You go first.
Well, I mean, I could probably start with just reflecting on some of the things that we've dealt with at Zipcar, and I think they apply. I think sometimes for-profit, non-profit may not even be the right question in some of these models. It's, when I think back to the beginning days of trying to partner with governments and try to build arguments, first of all, I think often if it's the private sector, the public sector, there are foundational ways government has operated for so long. It's very hard to change it. It's just the way government works, just by virtue of doing it over and over and over again, and it's very difficult to change it. The inertia itself is a very big challenge. And how do you get past that? Whether you're in a private sector or the public sector, we see it with big companies too. We're doing end run on several big companies right now at Zipcar, and I don't think they know what to do. It's the same cultural change. And then, if you make the observations where it has started to work, charter schools, for example, or you really have to have some foundational way to break down some of the infrastructure and policy and just behaviors that were there. And I'm not picking on unions, I'm not picking on any particular constituency right now, but I think all that has to be on the table. Or it doesn't work, because otherwise you're just kind of playing around the margin. And if you're really going to make fundamental change in how some policy, social policy changes, I think you have to put everything on the table and really address it at that level. And that's really hard to do. And it has to start almost always right at the top of the organization, wherever it is. And you happen to work for a mayor who I think must have had that set of core values. But and I think we're at a point right now in this country, whether you're at the city or the state or the federal level, where everything has to go on the table. We have to put it all out there and say, we're going to make these changes, because fundamentally, if we don't, we're really up against the wall. And that's a worry I have, that whether we really have the commitment politically and whether our society is ready to do that yet. Something has to break for that to happen. I'm not sure it's broken yet enough. So a little cynical, I know, but I think it's everything on the table.
Yeah, and I totally agree with all that. I kind of have seen incredible innovation and incredible, I think in a way you're either an agent of change or you're a preserver of the status quo, and there's a role for both. God knows that I've learned to value there are certain things where we need continuity, but at the end of the day, if you're going to have innovation, it's the ability to really spark change and then sustain it. I mean, I've been part of a lot of innovation that has sparked change, and it hasn't been sustainable. It happens a lot in government. You've got the permanent government, and you've got people who come in and are in for the ride for 4 or 8 years, and then you're done. And it's not the structure. It's really having the ability to convene enough of a coalition or a collaborative group that can take that innovation and sustain it. You mentioned charter schools, and I'm very involved with the Boston Foundation, where we've been very active in the whole charter school movement. And it's interesting that it took this new initiative by Arne Duncan to kind of the seeds had been laid certainly for a long time. You talk about an idea that's finally taken off, but it's been years and years of people finding the odds to start charter schools, and now all of a sudden, this massive government funding is allowing this to take to scale. And I think we finally have reached the tipping point where we are seeing some incredible changes in education. I mean, the same is going to happen in healthcare. It's bound to happen. There's a lot of change that's, but it took a lot of innovative attempts to finally get something that can be sustained. I think it's more sustainable at times from the private sector, but it often doesn't matter where it comes from, as long as there's a collaborative group that's convened and is in it for the long term.
So if I could sort of summarize the 2 points, which I think are bookends to each other, if we sort of take off the table structure, for-profit, non-profit, government, I think I'm hearing 2 points. On Scott's side, it's the concept of disruptive innovation that Clay Christensen talks about, and just sort of shaking things up a bit and going against the status quo, pushing against the systems. But then if you're going to be committed to it for the long haul, then you have to sort of reach out to find the sustainability of it, you know, and that could be a for-profit model, but as you said, you had to go out and start to partner with government, and whatever it might be, the sustainability. So it's first the sort of going against the status quo, but then you better really figure out what the business model is that's going to drive it to sustain it, because without that, it's going to sort of sit. And so that's great. So I'll just repeat it just in case you can't hear it. But I think the question was the idea around capitalization, in which perhaps there's a greater way to capitalize things in the private sector for innovation, or more efficient way, and perhaps not in the nonprofit sector. And you see those lines.
I would think so.
Right. Or near Mark, or yeah. You sort of stole my talk later, by the way. No, that's okay. No, go ahead. Yeah. See if I get it right.
Well, I totally agree that it's much easier in the private sector. I mean, although not much, it's hard. We all know that it takes a long time to kind of build the case and go out and raise the money. But it seems that you've got you're more in line of sight to kind of be able to persuade on the merits than with all the baggage you have to carry to get it done in the public sector or in the not-for-profit sector, which is also difficult at times. So I totally agree with that.
I think I would probably just agree with what you said. I think the concept of ROI has to stand up in a business setting or a government setting or a public setting in any way. And having observed government even inside Zipcar and how we've partnered with government at times, I will tell you, I don't think the concept of people really trying to drive to, what's the I, what are we really investing in this, and where are we really going to get some R out of this thing? If leadership really drove that debate, we would do many fewer stupid projects. And you can't do all smart projects, because if you do that, you're probably never going to accomplish your goal. But you can start with many better chances than we start with right now. And I think you can't be that smart that you only do the smartest ones ever. Businesses can't do that. We take risks all the time, and hopefully more than half of them work out. And I don't think government manages itself very well that way, and I wish they would. I think there's lots of lessons that apply, and ROI is a simple idea that really could be used in a much more functional way in government.
Yeah, I would, and then I'll get to Tim. I would just say, if I could add my 2 cents here, having, for some of have really sort of put a laser focus on, if we don't figure out how we interact with government, as opposed to think government is the answer, I think we are just sort of scratching the surface on everything we do. But I think I mentioned to Scott and I'm sorry to say it this way, but I'm just amazed at how many people that I'm working with in city departments and state agencies where they're just not clear on what the ROI is. What is the end game that they're trying to get with their resource allocations that they're given? Because we can talk about policy all we want, but when those policies get passed, they go down to the city and the state, to the city departments and the state agencies, and they're the ones that have to allocate them based on something. And I'm just amazed at how the goalpost is not clear. Just repeat the question really quick if I could, just to sort of capture it if I got it right. The first part, I think, just the point is let's sort of strip away nonprofit, for-profit, but that perhaps, and this is where I'm going to sort of extrapolate a bit, that perhaps when you've got sort of a tricky disruption going on, particularly one that might have a social impact element, the barriers are pretty high regardless. And maybe, Scott, you could talk a little bit about, some of those barriers and challenges you saw as you got to this point.
This is probably a better question for Zipcar's first investor, who happens to be sitting here. Look, I think this is a challenging business model, and so even the smartest people in the room, Gene Hem and others that came along, always questioned, will this thing ever make money? Can you make it? So there's a lot of risk in this. You're going to take people and put them in cars 24 hours a day, and you're going to insure them as the primary insurance carrier for your drivers while they're in the car. And John Corey, our outside counsel for years now, once said to me, I can't understand why anybody would ever want to be on your board of directors. So, he just sort of think through the risks there for about 5 minutes, and we weren't public. This was in a private setting. I think what we found made the difference is people that had that shared the passion for what we were trying to do. They saw the social issue that we think we can solve. They saw the excitement of a new business model, a new category, the ability to create a brand and lead that. And everybody over the years, this is my almost 8.5 years now in the company, starting with me, I think we all look at Zipcar and it's a shiny object for some reason or another. We all connect to it in a very, very passionate, very personal way. For me, it was the Pittsburgh thing and thinking about, how to make change happen in cities and do that in a model where you could make great shareholder value. I thought that was really cool, and I still think it's really cool. And I think for other people, they connect to it in different ways. And what we found was, a group of angels who were very patient, who stuck with us. And, I've said many times when I've spoken to business plan competitions that have sort of social impact built into them, or just on college campuses, that selecting that first group of investors is critically important, because it can be the difference between, a really nasty next round or, okay, we'll go again because we see you made some progress. And at Zipcar, thankfully, we picked pretty well in the beginning. And then I met Bob Cagle, who was the first investor at eBay. He cold called me in 2005. Bob grew up in Detroit. His mother worked at the Flint plant for GM. And he said, I've always wanted to make an investment in something that has to do with the auto industry. I've never found one, but I think this could be it. And he read about us in Fast Company magazine. It was an article that Scott Kirshner, local reporter here, had written in early 2005. And if I had drawn up a list of ideal investors for Zipcar, Benchmark and Bob Cagle would have been on the list, and I had never talked to him yet. I was about to start that process. So the point I was trying to get to was you find passion and those connections. Honestly, I think sometimes there's luck involved. And, I'm not that good. I'd like to think so, but we have a wonderful 12-year-old son who reminds me of that every once in a while. And I don't think any of us are quite that good. And I think Zipcar had some luck. I know it's painful for us now, but $4 a gallon is kind of a lucky thing for us. It's not something we would have done by design, and I wouldn't wish it on us, but we're benefiting from that right now. So there's lots of luck involved in our story. I think we put ourselves in the right place to be lucky, but we kind of exploited those opportunities. So all that's been part of it. Sorry, that was long.
No, that's okay. I'm gonna just close us out. I think that the way this ended was exactly, I think, how we sort of hoped. I think we are trying now. So as we bring about this Business Innovator Award, and you'll hear more about it when I talk today about the selection process, to start to blur the lines and blur the conversation. And I can tell you sincerely, when I first started Root Cause, which some of you know, I wanted to go right into having a consulting firm that consulted to for-profit organizations that wanted to have a social impact, and there's no money to do that, ironically. There was actually plenty of money to consult to nonprofit organizations to help them build business plans. It's pretty ironic to think about that. I think we actually are at a tipping point right now in this conversation where we weren't maybe 7-8 years ago. JP Morgan came out with a very interesting report at the end of December. I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues at MIT, and I just found out, I don't know if Jean knows this, but a professor, very well-respected professor, is about to do an entire 1 year of her sabbatical on the role of philanthropy and investing in for-profit models for social impact. So I think you're going to start to see the lines getting blurred by a lot more energy coming out in this area, and I think we need Zipcar stories that get all the way through the IPO, and I think it was a great question to sort of close us out. So thank you for joining us on this journey today on this first part.